So in my last video, I was very critical about Brett Brown with his lack of direction and clarity as it pertains to what the team is going to be looking like heading into the bubble. And it seems like we are at least moving in the right direction. So let's talk about it. So on Monday, it came out that Brett has been using Shake Milton as a starting point guard at practice, and Ben Simmons has, in his word, been exclusively used at the four position as like a point forward or a power forward, however you want to look at it. And I think this is the right move. I think that it's actually long overdue. So let's talk about the ins and the outs, how this is going to affect Ben, how this is going to affect the team. And also let's look at the shake aspect as well. So let's start off with Ben. I think that this move is going to be great for Ben Simmons. It can be great for Ben Simmons. And the reason why I say it can is because Brett Brown, the way that he's used Ben Simmons so far in his career, I believe, has been very limiting. He naturally fell into the point guard position, as Brett even himself put it, stating that when Ben Simmons got there wasn't really a great point guard there, and given Ben's facilitating abilities, Brett gave Ben Simmons the job, and he kind of like fell into it, not really as his natural position, but kind of like, hey, we have an opening here, and almost like Ben Simmons being like a lesser of the evils for that position. So it kind of worked for when it worked. But as we saw in the playoffs in 2018, when Ben Simmons had to lose the role to TJ McConnell, and then in 2019, when he lost the role in the playoffs to Jimmy Butler, we kind of knew that Ben Simmons at point guard really wasn't going to work. And we could talk about his shooting or lack thereof, but the fact of the matter is that it's a square peg in a round hole, and it just wasn't made to work. And I think that him moving to this point forward position, this power forward position, is really going to unlock his game, and it's going to really accentuate what he does well and what he's great at, and take him away from what he doesn't do well, which, when you think about it, that's really the name of basketball. Is you want to be able to push players towards their strengths. You know, you watch the Warriors, and it's a reason why you don't see Klay Thompson dribbling around all the time. You know, he plays to his strengths, running off of screens, catching and shooting, spacing, things of that nature. And I think for Ben Simmons, it's going to work the same way. So much we've seen him in just one or two things. He's either been pushing as the point guard, or when he doesn't have the ball, as we saw last year when Jimmy Butler took over the point guard responsibilities in the Raptors series, and I hate this term, the dunker spot. I hate the dunker spot personally. And how this is going to work is going to be predicated so much on how Brett Brown utilizes Ben Simmons and does not just relegate him to the dunker spot. I always felt as though the dunker spot was almost like purgatory for Ben. Sometimes it worked out very well. You know, sometimes he'd be at the right place at the right time and was just able to catch the ball down low off of the ball movement and get easy baskets. But sometimes it's just like he's just standing there. And I think that in order for it to work, that Ben has to be used as more of a screen setter in screen roll situations, and hopefully it can evolve even into pick and pop situations where he could set the screen and then spot up for open jumpers. Because, you know, it's funny, even though Ben Simmons obviously is not a great shooter and he doesn't play to that because he's not confident in his jump shot, one thing that I have seen when I do watch him practice his jumper is that the best jumper that he shows is just a catch and shoot jumper. So while some people I've heard say that if he at least develops a mid-range jumper, to me, honestly, I don't think he needs a mid-range jumper. I think it'll be more valuable for him to have a solid catch and shoot wide open three, because NBA players aren't really going to contest it. So I think that it'll be more valuable. And I'm not even a huge analytic guy, but I do believe that just from basketball and from a spacing perspective, it's more valuable for Ben to be a decent catch and shoot 3-point shooter, as opposed to him having a 15 or 16 foot jump shot. I'd rather him shooting threes and getting to the rim personally. So he can do that. I think that he could do well also posting up. I think that that's one of the biggest places that he can grow. A lot of times if you watch Sixers games, you'll see situations where Ben Simmons, he gets deep post position and it's like nobody's looking for him or nobody could just get him the ball. And I think that he has opportunities down there. And I also think that if he just spaces out too, that he could also benefit being like a diver or a cutter from the weak side. So I think that Ben Simmons could do a lot of things, and him just having the ball at the top of the key, you know, dribbling and facilitating and trying to get the offense going, I think it really limited him. And also in transition, you know, we always think about Ben Simmons so much because when we first started watching Ben Simmons, the first thing that stuck out to us was his passing ability. It was like, man, this guy can really pass the ball. He has vision. He has the gift of vision that only a couple players have. And I think that when we look at him as a passer, we don't think about him in his other strength, which is his finishing. Ben Simmons is a phenomenal finisher, and I compare him to LeBron James as a guy who is your best facilitator, but then also your best finisher. So in order to be able to take advantage of both, you have to be able to put adequate facilitators around him. And I think that Ben Simmons, being able to alleviate him of always having to bring the ball up, will allow him to streak down the floor and be able to be the recipient of the pass and transition and be able to get to the rim. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if Ben Simmons, if his field goal percentage gets higher, and even if his scoring average goes up, given the fact that he's going to be able to move without the ball. Because I feel like when you give him the ball, yes, he's a great facilitator, but it does take away from him as just an off-ball threat who could just move around. You look at guys, I think about a guy kind of like Shawn Marion. Shawn Marion was a guy who he could get 15, 16, 17 points in a game by just playing basketball without plays being drawn for him. He could just move around and just be an athlete. And I think that Ben Simmons, he could be that, and he has great basketball IQ, great abilities, and I think that actually plays very well towards that. Obviously, I love him in the pick and roll. He's shown when he was paired earlier this year with Trey Burke, even in instances with Josh Richardson earlier this year, he really showed the ability to be a great screener, a great roller, and I think that that's something that he could really, really grow upon, and that could really help the team. And he's done this on the court with Embiid there, so it's not a situation of, I've heard the idea of, oh, if Ben is at the 4 and you have Ben and Joel in the paint, it's not going to work because you're still clogging the paint. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case because I feel like if you move Ben around, then it doesn't necessarily have to clog the paint. But where it helps a lot, which was our biggest issue, was Ben Simmons on the perimeter during the playoffs. This is where it always came down to, and this is why his stats plummeted in the second round against the Celtics in 2018 and last year against the Raptors. When you put Ben Simmons at the top of the key to set up your offense, it allows whoever's guarding him to just move all the way back. And the reason why it works, the reason why Ben Simmons at the point guard works more in the regular season is because a lot of times teams aren't going to play their full hand. They're not going to show you exactly what they're going to do, especially if they're going to play you. But when you have teams like the Raptors and teams like the Celtics who they're like, okay, we could possibly see the Sixers, they're going to keep that card in their pocket until it's time to really use it. So what happened each time was that you have Ben Simmons at the top of the key, and all they do is just fall back to the free throw line. And all it does is just stuff the lane up. And what you want to do in basketball is you want players to be magnets, essentially. That's how you get optimal spacing, and that's how it lets your plays just run more fluidly. And Ben Simmons is a magnet once he gets into the paint, but Ben Simmons with the ball at the three-point line is not a magnet. So it really just stifles the defense. And you'll see situations where Ben Simmons will be at the top of the key with the ball trying to set up the offense, and his guy's just all the way down to the paint about 5 to 10 feet from Joel Embiid or whoever else is down there. And it just kills whatever design that you or set that you were trying to run. Putting Shake Milton at the top is going to be great because it's going to really clear things up. And there are situations that when you'll see Ben Simmons around the rim and somebody else is about to navigate there, the guy who's guarding Ben Simmons has a difficult time deciding if he wants to help off of Ben Simmons, because that's where Ben Simmons is a threat. So you want to put players where they are a threat the most, and I think it's going to perfectly work out. The same way you can have a team like the Lakers and you have a guy like JaVale McGee and Anthony Davis down there. JaVale McGee is not a great shooter, but those are two big guys and they make it work. And I feel like in a weird way, you can have a situation where Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, where it just works because even though Ben Simmons can't shoot it that well, Joel Embiid could space some. And I think it just allows more spacing all around the court. And you're going to have a situation where now the starting lineup, you have Shake Milton, presumptively, Josh Richardson, and Tobias Harris. And I think that you're just going to get overall great defense and better shooting. So, moving on to the Shake Milton side of things, I think my thought on Shake Milton is, one, I think that he could really do the job. That's the first thing. But secondly, what I want for this and why this move is just the beginning for Brett Brown is I want him to be able to really unlock Shake and not stifle him in what he could possibly do within this offense. I remember watching him early during his rookie year, and obviously he was a rookie and nowhere near a focal point. But I would just see times where it's like he has the ability, but it's like he's just standing in the corner. He's just standing off. And I'm thinking to myself, hey, use the kid. The kid has some game. And I hope that what Brett Brown does is that he empowers Shake. Because sometimes what Brett Brown does, and he alludes to this often, that sometimes there's a lack of trust for young players. It's almost like a fear. Brett Brown, I think at one point said that the playoff proves to be a man's game. But I don't want that to prohibit him from giving Shake the opportunity to be a true point guard, a true decision maker, and a true playmaker for this team. You have Joel Embiid, you have Ben Simmons, you have Josh Richardson, and you have Tobias Harris. Those guys are all more experienced than Shake Milton. And it's easy for a guy like Brett Brown to just say, okay, Shake, just bring the ball up and give it to somebody more experienced. But in order for this move to truly work, Brett has to give Shake the keys. He has to give him the keys. He has to give him the reins and say, hey, I want you to create. I want you to be the real point guard on this team. And of course, look, the offense is still going to run through Joel and Ben and the other guys. And those guys are, of course, going to be huge parts of the offense. But for this move to work, it has to start with empowering Shake. It has to start with utilizing Ben in versatile ways and not just relegating him to the dunker spot. So overall, I'm going to give Brett his props on this. I gave him criticism last week and I'm going to give him props this week, and I hope that he expands on it. I think that it's the right move. It's something that I wanted to be done before because honestly, after the Raptors series, I felt as though it was time for us to get a point guard and move Ben to the 4. That was something I wanted last year. But that didn't happen. We went the Al Horford route. That's another conversation for another day. But we're here now, and I've seen a lot of criticism and, people talk about the disappointment of, the Horford move and what this means, making this move at this time. And yes, it's not ideal. You committed $100 million to Al Horford at a spot where he's essentially moved into the backup spot. That's not how you want to allocate funds. But at the end of the day, I feel as though teams have to have the ability to pivot. And if you make a wrong decision, you have to pivot off of it. Ben Simmons never played point guard his entire career before getting to the NBA. And then he became a point guard. Square peg in a round hole. But hey, you move off of it. You move him back to the 4. Al Horford in his entire professional career never played the 4. And we tried to put him in as a 4-man. Square peg in a round hole. But we moved off of it. Brett Brown is going to save his job by being flexible and pivoting. He can't just stay stagnant because that has not worked. And I think he did the right thing. So this is not just me talking. I know I've been talking a lot, but there was just a lot to say on it. But please comment. Let me know what you think. Do you think the move is good? Do you think the move is bad? How will we look? Talk about it, comment, subscribe. Peace. Thanks a lot.